Hey everybody, this is ECAbrams, and in this After Effects tutorial we're going to talk about the new sourceRectAtTime expression, and we're going to use it to create automatically resizing lower thirds. Now I know I've already talked about lower thirds and elements that resize themselves to text layers before, but this is a new method. So if you're using Adobe After Effects 2014.2, also known as version 13.2.0 blah 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 blah, basically if you're current on this thing, then this is a new option. And I want to take this opportunity to really get into how expressions and accessing properties through expressions kind of works. We're going to talk about the new sourceRectAtTime. We're going to use it to make some resizing lower thirds. And in that process, I'm going to bore you with some details about how expressions really work. And hopefully you can use that knowledge to write your own expressions, to innovate and create new expressions and access different properties and link other properties together, because really expressions are just about creating linkages and relationships between properties. So the more you know about how to access those properties, the easier this is going to be, and it's going to open up, I want to say, a new level of creative freedom, because that sounds really douchey, but it's going to open up a whole level of creative freedom. So inside of After Effects, we're looking at basically what we saw in the intro. So we have some text layers that are growing, they're expanding, they're animating on, and then we have some rectangles that are under them, and those rectangles are growing as the text grows. So if I call up these and I hit UU, then we're going to see there's really only one set of keyframes, and that is what's on. It's on the text here. So the text is animating on. It's animating on using scale, all right? And we've got the range selector going to bring that on. And then, since the actual size, the distance between, all of these little boxes here, that's the real size of that layer, is changing, then we've got a layer behind it that's reading that change and populating itself with the values of that change. So you can see here the a little bit overly complex series of things that it takes to make that work. But we're going to delve into this, and we're going to start from scratch and kind of explain how it all works as we go. So to do that, I'm going to make a new composition. It doesn't matter. All these settings are totally worthless to you, so we're just going to move on. Don't worry about it. I'm going to call this one project file. So when I save our work here, then I'll put this up for download. So this is the project file. What we need to do is first make that text layer. All right, so I'll grab some text. I'm just going to click out here, and we're going to type out whatever. We can't see it because it's too light. So I'm just going to work with some really obscene colors. So I'm going to make this one just a nice hot pink. Why not? So, this says whatever. And in fact, let's leave it like this for now. We're going to deal with what happens with descenders and what happens with all this crap later. So let's just start off with this. So we've got some text, and that's wonderful. Now, we might want to animate it. We might not want to. For now, let's just link this to the shape layer. Worry about animating it later. Animating it later? No, animating it later. It's not an intentional pun. Leave me alone. We're now going to create a rectangle. So make sure you have nothing selected. I double click up here. That makes a rectangle that is the size, the height and width of the composition. So right now we have a rectangle. And so follow me here. We're inside the layer, we're inside the contents, we're inside the rectangle inside the contents, we're inside the rectangle path inside the rectangle inside the contents inside the layer, and then we're going to the size. Now, why am I saying all of these things? Well, it's going to be important when we start deconstructing what the guts of these expressions really look like. So what we want to do is put this layer below here. I'm just going to take this stroke, put it down to 0, and then I want to link the position to the size. So I want this rectangle's position to be altered in such a way that it is always, no matter what size it is, it's not expanding from the middle point, it's expanding from the top corner. So in order to do that, I can click on the position here. So I hold down Alt, then click on the stopwatch here. And the stopwatch is usually used for setting keyframes, just FYI. So clicking on that Alt stopwatch click will produce this thing, and then you can type in here. If at any point you're fine with what you've typed, you can hit the enter button. That's different from the return button. The return button is near your letters. The enter button is near your number pad, and that'll accept the thing. Or you can click outside of it, and that'll accept the thing too. If you click outside of it too early, then you're going to get probably an error message because you have an incomplete code. That might happen to us while we're typing, so don't worry about it. It might happen. The first thing I want to do is just warm you up to the idea of pick whipping from one thing onto another thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just grab this pick whip, which is this thing. I click, I hold, and then I can either link to the property here, and if I do that, you can see that it's directing me to content. And which content? Well, the content specific to something called rectangle 1, and then get inside that the content rectangle 1 path, and then the size. So we're here, inside of that is here, inside of that is here. So it's linking there. When I click outside, you'll see these values are now exactly the same. Okay, that's not exactly what I wanted. All right, that's not, I'm not cool with that. So what I want to do is then alter this in some way. How do I want to do that? Let's say I divide it by 2. All right, so dividing this number by 2 is dividing both the first and second part of this by 2. If you want to expand this out to basically what's happening, we've got the first part and the second part. Both of them are being divided by 2, and then it's producing the new first part, the new second part. But basically, you pick whip to something, you alter it, it's going to be something new. What does that mean? Well, notice how now when I alter the size of this, it's not coming from the center. The center is always going to be moved to be here, or more exactly, the entire thing is going to be moved to be wherever we want it. So now I'm going to take this. I am holding down Command, which makes it snap, and I want to snap this to the top left of the text. All right, great. I think that's super good. This seems to be working out. So now I just need to make the size of this thing always be the size of the text. All right, and we're going to use the new s.sourceRectAtTime to make that happen. So just really quick, what we're doing is we're going to alt click on the size. Awesome. Now we are going to pick whip to that layer. All right. Now here's what it's written down for us. It's got, hey, I'm going to look in this comp, and then I'm going to look at a layer inside this comp. And now we need to say, all right, where in that layer are we going to find the information we want? So for example, we could put, we could link this to another part of, say, the whatever layer. All right, I clicked outside, there's that error. So let's scroll down here. Let's look into the transform. Let's look into the properties. We could go like pick whip to the position here. So what would that mean? Well, we could say this comp, then look in the layer inside that comp, and then look at the transform.position. All right, and you can see that this value then gets put there. That's not the value we want. What we want to do is say, look in this comp, look in this layer, and then look in this layer's source rectangle at time. All right, and then we put some brackets, and then we have to say one more thing. We put another period, and then we say which part of the source rect@time. Well, for us, let's say the width. All right, so this expression is going to call us up the width. So let's say x equals that, and then put a semicolon at the end. Semicolons are a must. We must have these semicolons. They are so near and dear to all of us. It is what ends the line and tells After Effects, hey, this line is over. So we're creating a variable named x. X is equal to, look in this comp, look in this layer in this comp, look at this property of this layer in this comp. So we're like giving it an address. All right. Now I'm going to copy this line and I'm going to paste it. And then I'm going to say y equals this comp.layer.whatever, blah, blah, blah. Not the width this time. Height, height, H-E-I-G-H, height. That's how you spell that. Perfect. That's great. X equals this, y equals this. The output is going to be x, comma, y. All right. So why do I have to put x, comma, y at the bottom? Well, With this one, I didn't, because I didn't need to separate the two, right? I was doing the same thing to both. But in this one, this is another two-parter. See, it's got one part, comma, two parts. So the output has to be one part, comma, second part. And because both of them are being altered in a different way, you want to set up a variable for each one and then have those link to the stuff. So as you can see, it looks like it worked, right? So let's say I type out some more. Hey, it's growing, shrinking right along with us, okay? So let me just talk for a minute about what we're looking at here. The sourceRectAtTime is a property. Just like we could link to the position property, we didn't want to, but we could. And something that you really need to get your head around here in After Effects is, how do I find the properties that I want to link to? You'll notice it's always separated by a dot. These dots are similar to the dots that you will find, or the periods you will find in an IP address. Like we are at 98.137.0.1. That's getting more specific as you put down more dots. Just like in decimal points. So if we're at 3, that's not as exact as 3.7. Another example that might help you is the versions of things. So we're using version 13.2.0.49. So you see each point here, in this case, comp, layer, property of layer, part of that property, we're getting more specific. One of the challenges about expressions is knowing what are the specific names of these parts. It's very hard because you're kind of blind. You don't know what everything is in there. And I really encourage everyone to go through the Adobe help file that's at adobe.com. Check out all of the expression properties, all of those things, and really understand what properties you can get into. Because we're going to explore some more properties in this tutorial. What? You thought we were just going to talk about sourceRectAtTime? I tricked you. We're going to talk about a different property as well, because we need to get into these brackets here. We need to jump in and see, what is that all about? What do these brackets mean? On any expression, these brackets are where you put in arguments. And this isn't like a fight you get in with your girlfriend about what pizza toppings belong on pizza and which ones belong in the garbage. I'm talking, of course, about pineapple. This is the kind of argument where you're able to better define the terms of your relationship. In this case, we have two things that we can put in here. Many properties and many functions are different. So these could be totally different for each one, and you just kind of have to study up and know the language to know what's going on. So the first one is, when do you want me to look? SourceRectAtTime, tell me the width, and then we can say, tell me the width at this time. If we just write in time, that just means this current time right now, and that's the default. But we can also say, tell me what it was like a second ago. Tell me what it's going to be like in future time. And then we put a comma, because this is a two-parter. And the second one is either true or false. And what that means is we're either including or we're not including the extents, is what they call them. Extents are just basically like the stroke around shape layers, for example. That's an extent. And actually, I think that's really all that means in this case. So true, false. We're just dealing with text right now, so don't worry too much about that. But one thing we are going to have to worry about is time. I'm going to find out why right now. At this moment, this text is pretty good, but let's make it actually say something like hello. So now it says hello. Let me just make this bigger. Whoa, what is happening? Why is this stuff not lining up? Oh my God, I'm going to poop. Well, I'll tell you why. Because this is going down from its anchor point, whereas this is going up from its anchor point. And you're probably going to say, Evan, why don't you just flip that around? All right, have it grow up from the bottom, okay? Then it's no problem. I can include some capital letters. I can have these ascenders in here. Who cares, right? I'll tell you why. I'll show you why right now. Instead of hello, let's say hello, people. Okay, so now we're saying hello, people. Notice how these descenders, the parts of the letter that go below the baseline, are coming down, right? If we were, say, aligning this exactly with the anchor point here, let me just put a little line down there, then what would happen is we would end up with something that looks like this when you typed in the lowercase letters, right? Which is not exactly what we want. So what I'm trying to do here is basically design around one of the limitations of this expression. So that limitation is we really have to try to design around this weird floating anchor point that happens. And trust me, I've done some research into this. Sticking the anchor point right in the middle using the source-rect.time expression puts the anchor point there, but it also causes a bunch of other problems. So it's tricky. It's a tricky wicket sometimes. So what we can do is we can continue to design around that, and eventually I'll put out a tutorial about fixing up that crap. But let's just focus on this very simple use case scenario, all right? Let's now do the animation of this layer where the hello people animates on, okay? Let's do that. So what I did was I just went animate, I animated the scale, all right? The scale is going to start at a little 0 here. We're going to go into the animator, into the range selector. Basically what's going to happen is the start here is going to move across like this, okay? So we're going to keyframe the start from here, and then blah, 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 it goes all the way on. How does that look? Well, we got H, E, all right, we don't want it like that. I'm going to go into the advanced. I'm going to set the smoothness here down to 0 so you don't notice that intermittent weirdness. H, E, and so on. So observe now the greatness that is this thing typing on. So this is very simple, right? It's a very simple use of this. It's not that great, but you know what? This tutorial isn't that great either, and neither am I, so whatever. So what we want to do here is, let's say, all right, that's great. This is super good. It's animating the way we want, but it's not at the time we want. Move it ahead in time, all right? At 15 seconds, you know, then it comes on and, whoa, wait a minute, After Effects. This is not what I ordered, sir. All I did was move the layers from here where it both animates on, where both these layers are animating on correctly, sir. And now I simply wish to move this further in time. And geez Louise, it's almost like it is not respecting the way time works. And that is true. That's why we have the lovely time part of this particular expression. So we want to mess around with the time, all right? Now what's happening is that it's using a different sort of time reference than what we want. So what we need to do is we need to use this argument here to direct this layer to change the way it's looking at time. So what I'd like to do is set up a new variable. All right, I'm going to call this variable s. And I'm calling it S because S is going to stand for the source. And the source we want to look at is the layer we call hello people. Put a semicolon at the end of that. Now, I like to work with variables just because I did really well in math in school and I'm a huge nerd, as you saw from the intro. It says it right there. And for me, variables just make sense. Breaking this up onto multiple lines just makes sense. So if we have a variable called thisComp.layer, well, then I can just replace this with an S. I can replace this with an S, and everything's fine, right? Because S is just this, and that gets slotted in, whatever, we're good. So now I need to use a different property of layers to tell this thing what time to do stuff, all right? And that property is called the inPoint. So you know when we trim things and we move stuff around? Well, the inPoint and the outPoint of this layer is something we can access. Just like we can access the width of a layer, just like we can access the position, the scale, whatever, we can also access its inPoint. So we're going to do time and then subtract from the current time, subtract s dot inPoint. All right? So what we're doing here is we're saying, look at S. S is this comp, this layer. And then within that layer, tell me about its inPoint property. All right? Go get me that inPoint property. Put it right here. Put it right here. And then subtract that from the current time. Okay? And that seems to work. Pretty good. So you also need to make sure that you're putting that in for both the height and the width. All right, so we're just going to take this, give it the old copy, give it the old paste in there. Great. So now you can see it's coming on at the time we want. If we move this around in time, then it's going to work out. So this part of the argument is then used to define, the time and space, whatever. So hopefully this has given you a grasp of how that works and how expressions seek out and can return to you this information. So if you think, oh man, I really wish that as this layer was doing X, that this other layer would do Y in relation to that X, then you just have to find the variables and you have to find the properties of the layers that go with those variables. And like I said, check out the Adobe help file to get those. And then you just need to link those together. So that's like the biggest thing that expressions are. They are just ways to link one thing to another thing in a special way. So linking things together, making alterations, defining the relationship of these variables, just like I've now defined my relationship with pizza to be excellent and my home life to be a little bit rockier. But whatever, what are you going to do, right? So if you have questions about the source.RectAtTime, I would like you to ask them in the comments. If you've enjoyed learning about After Effects, motion graphics, VFX, that kind of thing, subscribe to this channel. If you don't have Adobe After Effects 2014.2, aka 13.2.0. whatever, check out the resizing lower thirds tutorial I've done previously that works up a different kind of method that relies on cheating the system, which is one of my favorite things to do. So check that out. And yeah, if this is the kind of thing you're into, subscribe to the channel, get involved on the Facebook page, follow me on Twitter, all that, links to all that stuff is in the description. This particular expression will be found in the description as well, just in case you didn't notice it when I was typing it up on the screen. And yeah, I guess that's about it. So if you have questions about this, put them in the comments. If you want to see more things about what to do with text, check out some other tutorials related to that on the channel. Subscribe to this channel if this is the kind of thing you want to look at. And if you do, then I will see you next time and around the internet. Thank you so much for watching, and have a nice day.